It's interesting that we are taking up the subject of forgiveness, forgiving and forgetting. Today is a critical day in some ways for some people who are caught in the tumult of revenge. Sometimes this takes place in a very violent and very strong way, in which people get hurt, killed, their property damaged. A lot of fear is extended. And then on the smaller level, on the individual level, each one of us experiences that there are people and situations which trigger the feelings of revenge within us. So forgiveness is not as easy to do as it is to say. And the same with forgetting. In the last little while, we've been hearing a lot of classes about things that impress our minds, that impress our hearts, and that then come out again. The more we are spiritual, the more we are soul conscious and detached, the more it is possible for us to be dispassionate, where ordinarily we are very passionate and very reactive. You know, in an ideal world, people understand each other, and they respect each other, and they give each other full permission to be exactly who they are and to do whatever it is that is dear to them to do. But in the world we live in today, there are many things which become provocations for each other. And things don't take place in isolation. There is usually an escalation before something happens which is so strong that it gets out of hand, becomes very violent. And we take up this subject because it's around us, it's here, it's in front of us, it's in the air, it's in the newspapers, and people that we know are directly or indirectly affected. And therefore there is the feeling inside, what should I do? What can I do when there are things going on that shouldn't be going on? When a person or a group of people do things which are, you can say, inhuman, if not inhumane, what causes that? On the most insensitive level, sometimes people get paid to cause an upset. And they will do that because they don't have money, without thinking. That happens. People are not as free as they would like to be. Ask yourself, how free am I to say what I want to say, and do what I want to do, and go where I want to go, and be with whom I want to be? How free are we? Very few of us are completely free to do those things. We have responsibilities, and when we love our responsibilities, we don't feel them as a bondage. We include that in our feeling of freedom, because when we love what we must do, we do it completely voluntarily. And in a way, forgiveness has to do with carrying this feeling of loving what we do as far as it can go, so that everything we do is because of a certain quality, a certain caliber of love. And then we begin to see that forgiveness is also very connected with having the power to love. Because to be able to love unselfishly, freely, and in a way that brings full benefit to the recipient or the recipients, we have to be very powerful and very full. And this is one of the reasons why we've often been told in our spiritual practice to check our accumulation of spiritual powers. Love is probably one of the greatest spiritual powers. So, to be able to evaluate within ourselves, how much love do I have? There are three things here. One is how much love, or what is the intensity of my love for God, and how much do I love humanity, and how much love and regard do I have for myself. Many people who embark on a spiritual path do so because they feel motivated by a conscious or a subconscious urge that comes from love of humanity and love for God. Love for God can be translated, in a sense, into love for justice and love for truth, love for what God stands for. It's important, in order for us to live, for the things in our life to make sense. And when we have a very strong connection with God, who we experience as the embodiment of truth and justice and love and power and peace. And we place ourselves in relationship with God, it creates inside of ourselves an urge to make those qualities practical realities in the world around us and in the experience of the people in that world. And this urge is what encourages us to do service, spiritual service, godly service, service of humanity. There's a number of ways to put it. But when all of those things are there, this then gives us a reason to do what we do. Because we don't want to live, or we don't consider that life is really life, if all we're doing is eating, sleeping, moving around and reproducing ourselves. That is not human life. That is an animal life. So in order for this life to be called a human life, it has to have that dimension of meaning which comes into our lives because of our positioning of ourselves in relationship to God and what God stands for, and that the expression of that through our thoughts, words and actions makes our life human. Why we become Homo sapiens, that's the human being with wisdom, which distinguishes us from animals. But what happens is that we, because of various reasons, become spiritually depleted, and we lose sight of that which gives our lives meaning. There are many causes for this, which may be political or social or biological or medical or financial, or many reasons. But we would say, those of us who are committed to a spiritual practice where we want to transcend our limitations and move on from our shortcomings, we would say that none of those reasons constitutes a justification or an excuse for us to come under the influence of what is generally defined as negativity, violence, that kind of gratuitous, hysterical, out of control behavior that produces so much regret, sorrow, pain, and escalation. So the terms forgiveness come in here. Generally, forgiveness is a religious word because it requires spiritual strength to forgive. And I think probably the greatest strength that we need in order to forgive is tolerance. Because we must be able to endure whatever it is that comes our way of a provocative nature, things that come to us to hurt us, to test our values, whether we live by our values. And if we don't have tolerance, then either we will be reactive right away, or we will take it on, but it will accumulate, and we will suppress that which we are taking on, and it will continue to accumulate, and it will need an outlet. So sometimes it takes only a small thing to become the trigger that is the outlet for a lot of accumulated and suppressed suffering. And this very easily translates itself into insane behavior. So in order for us to forgive things like this, it's important, I think, for us to understand how it accumulates, where it comes from, and to understand that a person who we might identify as a perpetrator of gratuitous violence, if our own situation was maybe slightly different, maybe not even, it could just as easily be ourselves. And so the first obstacle to remove in order for us to genuinely develop and evoke true feelings of forgiveness is the attitude of being what we call holier than thou. You know, holier than thou. It's an expression that's used in English to refer to, I am very good. I didn't do anything like that, what you did. So I am holier than thou. So we call that a holier than thou attitude. And you'd be surprised how easily we adopt that, you know. Something that is done to us that outrages us, we can adopt that attitude. Or something that is done to someone else, we can adopt that attitude. It is a very common human shortcoming to make oneself the judge of another person and to condemn another person. So again, in our use of language, we must distinguish between what is an evaluation and what is a condemnation, because we tend to use the word judgment to cover both, and both are very different. An evaluation is neutral. A condemnation is negative. We have the faculty of judgment by which to evaluate things. And this is necessary for us to act, because every day we have to make many moral choices. Condemnation is when we are hasty and we make a judgment without evaluating. We become quick to judge, which means we condemn. without thinking, without delaying, without considering. And this is very common. And this is because we are not very strong inside, on the whole. So in order to be forgiving, many ingredients are there. It's not so easy to say that first we must be this, and second we must be that, and third we must be the other, because it's an accumulation. We develop in one area and then another area, and then something happens and we reevaluate that, and gradually we grow in our moral strength and in our magnanimity. Magnanimity is a word that I like. It may be horrible for the translators, but what it means is greatness of spirit. A person who is very generous in how they judge. They will not condemn very easily, but they will look at what has happened dispassionately, not getting emotionally involved with the thing. Sometimes people will say, well, you have to get emotionally involved with the thing because otherwise you are callous, insensitive, and with a heart of stone. But this isn't totally true. To be dispassionate means that our equanimity of feeling, our peace, our calmness and serenity, which is the product of the practice of, knowing and thinking of the self as a peaceful soul, which is embodied in the expression Om Shanti. I must hold to that and observe what has taken place, such that my powers of understanding are not swayed by my feelings being provoked by something that is designed to destabilize me by making me feel something, by provoking me into an emotional reaction, you see. And so I mustn't be horrified or filled with pity or revenge or all these various emotions that propel us into hasty actions, you see. One interesting example that shows you the danger of this is that, say, in a street, there are two people fighting, two adults fighting. One who goes to break them up, they both will fight that one, and he will get squashed down, and then they will carry on with their business. This is very typical of what happens. And why this happens is because when we see something that in our judgment shouldn't be happening, because it disturbs us, and we want to stop it, we go in there and we try to do something. The reaction is, I have to do something, or something must be done, you see. This is the thing that gives people an excuse for revengeful behavior. And it's very much absorbed into our cultural heritage, whichever culture we come from. And this is the thing that keeps these grudges going. So forgiveness is in a way like saying, whatever it is that comes in front of me, or that I hear about, or that I'm faced with, I need to be able to handle it emotionally so that it doesn't disturb me, so that I don't internalize it, because if I do, I will surely reproduce it in my thoughts, in my words, or in my actions. And if I don't like that violence or that injustice or whatever, and I feel strongly about it, I will mimic it, and I will deny that I'm doing it or that I did it. You see, this is the wonder of human nature, human behavior. But cultivating dispassion is very helpful in this, because along with cultivating dispassion, we also learn that the reason why I'm cultivating dispassion is so that I do not take on and take in and absorb that negativity, because I will absolutely certainly do that same thing. With whatever we take in, we will give out. So then what we're learning in our spiritual practice is, and it comes in this expression, see but don't see. Hear but don't listen. So we have been told, not only in our spiritual practice, but it exists in literature, in scriptures from all the major religions and cultures, that the world is a stage and we are actors. There is a drama going on. And so when we see in the cinema or in the television some things going on, some violence, there's plenty of violence goes on. Why? Well, it sells. People like it, you know. Because people are stimulated by it. So it's a kind of a love-hate relationship with things that disturb us. We get involved with it. We enjoy not liking it. We like it. We like to not like it so much that we like it. It's a funny thing, you know. But if it didn't sell, they wouldn't put it on, you know, if there wasn't a demand. So those things which our moral nose defines as wrong also are the things that you might want to say we are addicted to. Addiction is an interesting expression because it means that you have to have something that's very bad for you, and you continue to have that thing until it kills you or drives you insane, or you give it up, because your powers of understanding what is beneficial for you become stronger than your weakness for and desire for what is harmful for you. in spite of the consequences, the negative consequences. So in order for us to sort out all of these things that are causing us to do what we do and react the way we do, it is useful to analyze them a little bit and separate them out into their compartments so that we can make impartial decisions, so that we can develop an ethical policy for ourselves and do what we can to live according to that. The ethical policy that we make for ourselves has to be an ongoing evolutionary process, because if we evolve that ethical policy by making a list of all the things we think are right and wrong, and that becomes very theoretical, and it doesn't take into consideration the realities of our own shortcomings and our habits of justifying certain things that we, on the other hand, say are wrong. So it's a continuous negotiation internally between ourselves and the realities of life. But the more we are internalized and the more we watch our own selves, the more effective we are at creating an ethical policy that we can actually live by. So a spiritual practice is very necessary for us to do anything like this, because all these higher purposes and goals absolutely require a gradual increase of personal strength. And I think that if everything is lost, all your things, all your people, everything, but if you end up with personal strength and a clean conscience, there is no greater achievement. I think as we age into our experience come from time to time disasters. You know, we've been through forest fires and earthquakes and riots and car crashes and, you know, losing family members and killings and on and on and on. You know, they're not just in the media, but they come into our own experience. And one of the things we find is that these losses, these calamities and tests that take place, they have a hidden benefit for those of us who pass through them, because, I mean, on the face of it, they're terrible and they're very destructive. But how we survive them and how we relate to them, how we participate in them, says a great deal about ourselves. We can be victimized by them. That's very easy. You don't need to make any effort for that. It's automatic. But a person who is in a spiritual practice develops the perspective that is looking for, how will I handle this thing in such a way that I take whatever hidden benefit is contained within it, you see. And you hear stories about this. One quite commonly quoted example is when a person gets the news that they have a life-threatening illness and they have X number of years to live or something like this. They get a cancer, or they have a big car crash. They survive, they live, and quite often you will hear them say that it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it made me understand something, because it made me mature, because it made me learn to appreciate what I have, because it taught me self-reliance. There's many things, but as we grow older, I think more and more of us have something like this in our own repertoire, in our own memory. You see, and even in my own experience with physical pain, I was astounded at what a great teacher this apparently onerous and horrible thing that we resist as much as possible, but the valuable lessons that it gives, when it comes down to it, you say, I wouldn't change any of it. I would not exchange this. While you're going through it, of course, you don't appreciate the legacy that it will give, but there is definitely an extraordinary benefit. And one of the key lessons is about resistance. Actually, there's a close connection between resisting and reacting. The normal response to something negative, or something that we perceive or judge as negative, is to resist and react. And what that will always do is increase the level of negativity of that thing. And then we will increase our resistance. And it will reach a point where, as they say, this is another quote, famous quote, it makes us or it breaks us. And it can go either way. If we're strong, and if we're supple, if we truly are motivated by higher aspirations, it will make us. But if resolutely we insist on being immature and hysterical, it will break us. The choice is ours. You know. So when we realize that the choice is ours, along comes self-respect. And self-respect says, whatever it is, I understand that it is valuable, that there is profit in this for me. And what I have to do is interpret this to my advantage. That is the advantage of my being, the advantage of my soul, my spirit, my essence. There's a long-term advantage, you see. And part of practicing to be dispassionate is it allows us to delay the emotional or hysterical reaction to whatever's going on. And then we have a chance to determine and distinguish the benefit that's there, you see. The more we know about the laws of spirituality, the more readily the understanding will come into our conscious awareness. And we're in a position to say, yes, I realize that on the face of it, it's terrifying, horrible, murderous, etc. But let me look deeper, let me look behind it, and let me see what are the opportunities here for me personally. And we can't do anything about anyone else's reaction by being externalized, but by being internalized and seeing how it readily brings us closer to our contact with God, to our awareness of our spiritual essence, and to the fact that we have choice to be negative or to be positive. And if I am truly positive in regard to this thing, it carries me forward in so many ways. You see. Then another very important thing is that tolerance. You see, I have to be able to take in my own emotional makeup the hits, the thrusts of strong negativity that may be directed towards me or that I may have to witness being done between people. And I'm reminded of an example. There was a television news cameraman in Cambodia during the time when there was war there. And he saw things that human beings do to each other in time of war that is more horrific than anything that could even come anywhere near a newspaper or a television broadcast. You know, they only show you what will sell. What goes beyond that, you'll never see. So he came to an understanding in regard to all this violence, that he himself made himself completely peaceful and completely gentle, and he washed out every last trace of violence from inside himself. It was the only way to survive being a witness to such things, you know. And it takes a strong person to do that. But all of us have within ourselves the potential for that kind of strength if we decide that we're going to use that potential in that way. It's really up to us. But it's important to know that we do have that potential. It is easy to get swept up in mass hysteria. But the practice of being a pure, peaceful soul and making that a natural part of your nature, creates a different atmosphere and vibration. And I remember one time experiencing this many, many years ago when I was in my teens, in the early 1970s during the Vietnam War, when there were many demonstrations, sometimes very violent demonstrations between police and protesters in different places in the world. Some of you may be old enough to have participated in that too. But I remember being in the middle of a very wild demonstration with all kinds of terrible things going on. And my state of being was not wild, even though I wasn't a meditator at that time, but perhaps the potential to be a meditator was already there in my makeup. But I observed very much that you can say the immediate sphere of vibrations where I was completely different. And the other people who were charging and running and throwing various weapons around couldn't see me. I was totally invisible. And I thought that was very interesting. And a policeman came walking towards me who was also very tranquil and said to me, "Oh, what are you doing here? You don't belong here," without knowing anything about me. But I think that this phenomenon is something that we can use very much to help us acquire the base ground in which to develop the natural ability for forgiveness. Because if I myself are not taking on or taking in any of that negativity, then whatever is our own peace and our own compassion, which can be extended when we're really not caught up in that hysteria, we can actually extend the vibration of peace and goodwill. Because we also know that when people are doing things that are inhuman, or when they're experiencing that is inhuman, at that time they are not completely human. It's been snatched away from them by circumstances. But by ourselves remaining completely human and focused within, we have the capacity to, as we have learned, with our thoughts, with our attitude, vibrations, actually alter the atmosphere and thereby change the circumstances. Because negative actions can only take place in a negative atmosphere. The atmosphere is that which allows something to happen. So a very important ingredient in spiritual practice is to make ourselves stronger than the prevailing atmosphere. And there's a very interesting mathematical calculation that helps us to understand that this approach is quite valid and viable. And the calculation is this, that an object is by definition less powerful than a being. The object cannot move itself. It cannot initiate an action. Only a being can do that. Circumstances can be considered as objects, even though they are the consequences of the actions of beings. They're not actually beings, therefore they qualify as objects. A being who is acting negatively has less power than a being who is acting positively, because positive is more and negative is less. It's just mathematics, you know. A minus is less and a plus is more, you see. So if you really know yourself as a being and you act positively, plus you connect yourself with the Supreme Being, that the sum total of that is greater than all negativity. I'd like to just rephrase this little equation for you, because there was an important ingredient that I left out, and that is that the power of God and the power of evil is equal, right? So, however great the evil is, and it can be very great, and however great God is, which is very great, those two are very big forces, you see. But always, God plus one, who is positively oriented, is always greater than any amount of evil, you see. So simply what has to be done is to be turned within so that the self is connected with its own essential, pure and positive qualities, and then connected with God. Then our ability to face, endure, and neutralize the impact of evil is very considerable. So the point about its regard to forgiveness is that we aren't taking it in, we aren't taking it on, so we don't have to take it out. It's a lot of work to take it out once we've taken it in. But if we don't take it in, then instead of taking it in, we radiate positivity and neutralizing energy. We are not judging or blaming or trying to control what's going on, which is out of our control. But we are doing what is in our control, and which is also effective, you see. So we have to leave to God what is God's work, and we have to take up the challenge of doing what is our work. And our work is to be unaffected by the negativity. Because when we are unaffected by it, it can't spread, it can't increase or escalate. All it can do is die. And then there's no question of forgetting, because we didn't take it in, you see. When you take something in and take it on and suppress it, and it goes in your bones and your blood and all your thoughts and comes out in all kinds of ways, it's very difficult to forget, because you create this circling of negative thoughts, of blame, of resentment, and whatever it was the negativity that you're reacting to, you're multiplying it and absolutely participating in its energy. And then when you decide to forgive and forget, you can't, because you're completely imprisoned in it and enslaved by it. And then you become the next perpetrator. This is how the illness of negativity is able to maintain itself. But once we understand how that illness works, then instead of being additional patients, we can become nurses and doctors to take it out. So I think this is really the key about this. So I'm going to stop now because my voice is running out, but you might have some questions. Oh, Shanti. If you have questions, you have to tell very loudly, because otherwise I won't hear. By what? Yeah, that's a very important question. If we do happen to be affected by negativity, what are the yuktis to get out of it and forget? I found a very good yukti for that in a computer. Not that the computer will do it, but there's a program. When I first learned about computers, there's a program called is it Excel? One of these accounting programs, or something like that. So what you can do is you can put all the numbers in, that this thing is this much money and that thing is that much money, and you're counting up whatever you spend and whatever you earned and so on. And then at the bottom there's a total, and it's got a little mechanism in that particular square, so that whatever numbers you put or whatever changes you make, it always gives the right total and it'll change accordingly. So I thought this is a very good metaphor for negativity that we have taken on board from the past, but which is still bothering us right now. Even if it was this morning, or it could be from some years ago, or from when we were very little children. And what I found in the computer program is that you could make changes retroactive. And so I thought, well, what we can do, we have memory. In our minds, we can go back to times where we remember taking in the negativity and taking it on. But we can take ourselves back to that time and that situation and replay the scene, but how we are in the midst of that scene is how we are now. That means with the spiritual knowledge that we know, with the attitudes that we understand are useful and helpful, and we can re-experience that scene in a new way, so that we observe whatever we had taken in and taken on as more detached and dispassionate observers. And we can also look at the protagonists in a more detached way, and instead of taking the thing in the direct way in which it was handed to us, we can take it in terms of our interpretation, and we can re-put it in our memory bank in the way as we would change the figures in an accounting program. And you see, diddle, 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 it changes everything and puts you a new total. And I found that I tried this out a few times, and I found it really quite good. So it might work for you, or there might be some other thing. But see, what spiritual knowledge tells us is, I am a soul, and I'm forever, I'm eternal, and I'm right in the middle of my cycle. So by sitting in the middle of the cycle, whether it's one life or many lives, 84 lives, 20 lives, however many, 63 lives, but sitting in the middle of your cycle of drama, what you simply do is you have a 360-degree perspective on yourself. You see? And so who you are now, or who you were, or who you will be, is not someone else. We're the same self. But how we feel about something that happened in the past or is going to happen in the future, if our memory extends that far, which technically it could. Some cultures, they think of memory as seeing the future, because everybody does it, so they don't know you can't do it, We know that, but other people don't, so they do it. What we call primitive cultures. They see the future and then act accordingly. So we can actually use many things that are available to us. And we can change how we feel about something that happened in the past, and that actually changes the history, changes the effect of history, changes something from a sin, whether we did it or it was done to us. It's a sin in both cases because we are negatively affected by it. We neutralize it, we learn from it, we change it from a sin into an act of charity and a benefit.